Hey guys, Mr. Tweet here. Today we are going to be moving forward in our class and we're going to be starting government. One of the fundamental questions that we deal with in government has to do with the legitimate use of power and authority. What are, what are those legitimate uses of power? And you see this all the time. And we even see this in our, in our discourse today in our country. Where we have a pandemic going on. There's evidence that when one person wears a mask, it keeps other people that are in the vicinity of that person safer, even if it's just a cloth mask and it's not like a heavy duty like N95 mask or something like that. So me wearing a mask makes other people safer. Does the government have the legitimate power to tell me that I have to use a mask, right? That's one of the fundamental questions we're dealing with in our society right now. And ultimately, it's a question about the power and authority of government. It's not even a question about whether masks are good or not, whether they're useful or not, although sometimes the debate does devolve into that about, well, I've heard that this mask is not effective or that mask is more effective or whatever. The question is, does the government have the power to tell me that I have to wear one? Right? Maybe not, and I think that we have an idea of kind of a level of boundaries. So like, does the government have the power to tell me I have to wear a mask in my own home? I don't think there's anybody who's saying that. Does the government have the power to tell me I have to wear a mask when I go to the store? That's different. Now, is that a legitimate use of power and authority? Well, people have different reasons for why it is or it isn't. And you'll hear that in our society. You'll hear people talk about like, well, based on my conception of freedom, I don't think it's legitimate. Or based on my conception of safety and the importance of safety, I think it is a legitimate use, right? Or other people will appeal to authority and they'll say like, for instance, like, well, based on what I think about the Constitution, I think it is legitimate. Or based on my idea of the Constitution, I think it's not legitimate. So this idea of the legitimate use of power is one that's been with us for millennia, hundreds of years. And one of the things that political philosophers do to try to come up with an answer to this question is they do like a mental exercise, because you can't go out and observe or measure what I'm talking about. They try to come up with an idea of what they think humans were like, what our life was like before we had government. So that becomes kind of like the basis for the baseline even for government legitimacy. That if we have a government and our lives are worse than what it would be with no government, then we probably should do something about that. And that government probably has too much power, too much authority, and they probably should be overthrown. Whereas if our lives are better than what life would be like with no government, then that does give that government we have some legitimacy. That right or wrong, our lives are better because of it. And so maybe that does justify some of the actions that it takes. So this is a mental exercise that philosophers have been doing, political philosophers have been doing for millennia, right? Going back to like Plato and Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, they've been thinking about, trying to answer this question. What was human life like before we had organized government? Before we had an organized society, what was human life like? So I'm gonna have you guys watch 3 videos. And as you watch those 3 videos, I want you to listen to these 3 different philosophers, at least listen to what their ideas were about that, what we call the state of nature. What life was like for human beings before we had an organized society. And in order to have an organized society, you have to have some sort of power structure, which is a government. So you're going to watch those 3 videos. The other thing that I want you to watch out for, because it's going to lead into tomorrow's lesson, is the idea of the social contract. The idea as like when we enter society together, what is it that you agree to do? What is it that I agree to do? And what is legitimate? So I have someone who wants to say hi to you. This is Otto. Otto is teacup poodle. And he's super nice, and he wanted to say hi, so I let him come say hi. So go eat some more food, Otto. So anyways, that's what you're going to be doing today. Watching those 3 videos, trying to come up with like, first of all, what is their idea of the state of nature? And then coming up with your own ideas of the state of nature, right? Now, what the state of nature is not It's not if you took modern human beings and dropped them on an island where there was like no government, and then they had to try to like make their own government, or they had their own conceptions of the modern world, and then they were just ripped out of that modern world. You're trying to think what you think human life was like before we even had kind of what we think of as modern civilization, before we even had like any kind of organized hierarchy of society. What was human life like? So we're going back thousands of years here. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. You just need to try to come up with what you think that is. And then I've got a couple tasks that you're going to use that for today. And then again, tomorrow, it's going to be focused in on that idea of the social contract. What is it that we all agree to as part of living together in a society, right? And that's kind of where we're going to go. So I'll have a couple videos probably on your assignments for today. And then I'll have some videos for you tomorrow. You guys have a good one.